Hello, Barry.
Hi, John. How you doing?
Fine. Hey, another dimension of this craziness going on around us is all of these tariffs. And let's see, President Trump at one point described tariff as the most incredible word or some a different description. But sadly, it's not so nice in reality.
Well, I think that this is a crazy time, as you say. I think Trump has imposed tariffs that are higher than anything we've seen since the Great Depression, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs of the Great Depression. And I think we're starting to see the countries push back on this. And I've been looking at the Swiss example. The Swiss are going to file a lawsuit against the tariffs that Trump has imposed on Switzerland. And it's crazy because the tariffs that he's imposed on Switzerland is 39%, which is one of the highest tariffs imposed on any country. And the interesting thing is that last year the Swiss eliminated all tariffs on their manufactured imports. So yeah, this is a crazy time in the sense of we're trying to impose 39% tariffs. The other thing that Trump has threatened to do against the Swiss is he's threatened to impose targeted tariffs and price controls on patented pharmaceutical products that we're importing from Switzerland. And that hasn't happened yet, but he's threatened to do that. So the Swiss are going to file a lawsuit challenging this. And basically, excuse me, they're going to go back to the 1850 treaty between Switzerland and the United States, which basically has a most favored nation clause, which says that the U.S. cannot impose a higher tariff on Swiss imports than we impose on any other country. So here we have, he's imposing a 39% tariff on Switzerland, which is one of the highest in the world. The other thing that they're going to challenge is that this is a violation of due process, their property rights, because they have patents on these pharmaceutical products. And when you start imposing price controls and targeted tariffs, you violate their patent rights, their property rights. So this is happening, and other countries are doing the same thing. Italy and Germany are going to file lawsuits because they have treaties similar to the Swiss. So I think we're going to see a real confrontation here between the Trump administration and the countries that are saying this is unconstitutional and it violates treaties that have been in place for centuries. So that's where we're going with this at this point.
Yeah, the other place where we're going, if this is held legal, which I think that's President Trump's ultimate backdoor way out of this path that leads to nowhere good that I know of, and that's that the courts have declared it illegal, and I guess it's going to the Supreme Court, and I guess that'll be the final word. And so let's hope that happens. If it doesn't happen, not only do we have all of these individual violations and restrictions on trade, but we have, under any administration now, a precedent for a planned economy and a managed trade. Two things that are absolutely awful. Maybe President Trump is the greatest economic manager and planner that ever lived, but the problem is he's only president for another 3 years, and then somebody else that's not a good manager or planner will come along and have the precedent to totally destroy the economy with terrible ideas. And I'm not saying President Trump's a great economic planner. Who knows? But you know, he's utilizing we're the biggest kid on the block, and so if we threaten tariffs, you have to come along. If anybody else is doing what we were doing, it would be abject apocalypse. I'm trying to look for the right word. No other country could even imagine getting away with what we're doing. We might be able to pull it off because we are the biggest kid on the block, and so there's some monopoly rents there. Sorry for the economic jargon. Some ability to raise prices and get away with it, but still, we both taught international trade during our careers as professors, and the political argument for free trade is far better even than the economic argument.
Yeah, and I think that it's not only an economic issue, it's a constitutional issue because basically the Constitution is very clear. Congress has the power to set tariffs.
Right.
And it's explicitly in the Constitution. Well, what the Congress has done is essentially delegate the power to set tariffs to the president. And so I think in these Supreme Court cases, what we're going to see is quite a challenge to that whole idea. And what Trump has done to finesse the thing, he has imposed these tariffs using executive orders rather than treaties. Now, basically, what the Constitution says is that, first of all, Congress should have the responsibility for setting tariffs. And secondly, it should be by treaty, not by executive order. And treaties require a 2/3 vote of Congress. And essentially what Trump has done is to circumvent the whole Constitution in using these executive orders. He's not the only one to do that, but he's done it to an extent unprecedented. And so I think what's going to happen is when these cases hit the Supreme Court, what we're going to see is that the Supreme Court, if it does its job, what I think it should rule several things. First of all, let me clean up my screen here. First of all, it says it should reinforce the fact that tariffs are the responsibility of Congress, not the president. And secondly, the tariffs have to be imposed with a 2/3 vote of Congress in a treaty, so that essentially tariffs are on the same level as the Constitution in terms of protection. So the positive thing that could come out of this is actually restoring the balance of powers between the president and Congress. Essentially, for decades now, we've seen Congress basically failing to do its job. Executive powers have been growing and growing and growing. And the Supreme Court steps in now and then to try to stop this. But essentially, neither Congress nor the Supreme Court has been able to check this growing executive power. And it's not just Trump, it's under both Republican and Democratic administrations. So I think the tariff issue is going to it should lead to resolving some very important issues, constitutional issues, as well as economic issues. As you say, we're free trade economists. We have all the theory and empirical evidence of the importance of free trade. But we also need the legal experts to make sure that we have a balance of powers as set by the Constitution. So I get sort of riled up about this because it's so important.
I can tell you're riled up, and that's good. But I also want to note for our viewers that what Congress has delegated is tariff setting power, which is probably unconstitutional. But what they've delegated is tariff setting power in an emergency, and there's no emergency right now. So that's another thing the courts have ruled is, maybe these powers are okay in an emergency, but there's no emergency. So
and in fact, what the WTO, the World Trade Organization, has actually ruled that the tariffs that Trump has imposed on Switzerland and other countries cannot be justified on national security or emergency grounds. So we have a precedent here that if the WTO says that this is not an emergency or a security issue, there's no way the Supreme Court would, I think, come to a different conclusion here. As you say, there's no emergency. This is just a case of executive powers unconstrained.
And I'm not even sure why a tariff addresses an emergency. If anything, if there's some sort of emergency, we want to make sure all channels are open to resources from outside our country and none are blocked, because the ones that are blocked are the ones that may be retaliated with, maybe just the exact ones that we need in, for example, a national security emergency where we're collecting materials from all over the world to build weapons.
Well, this is another part of the crazy situation we have. We're imposing these high tariffs on our allies, actually higher on Switzerland than on countries that presumably we're confronting, China and so forth. So I think there are a lot of ways in which we can move forward and try to restore some sanity to this whole tariff issue.
Well, let's hope for the immediate future that the only resolution that I can see is the Supreme Court does something, and then the points that you made follow from that gradually over time. And with that, we'll have another one of these great conversations another time.